Blox Fruits is the biggest game on Roblox, but how did it go from something like this to the Blox Fruits we all know and love? This is the evolution of Blox Fruits. Blox Fruits first opened to the public in January 16, 2019. And when you entered the game, the max level was literally only 300, which means you could kind of just finish the game in one sitting. And they only had 12 fruits in the game. And those fruits consisted of the bomb, spike, chop, smoke, rubber, flame, ice, dark, light, magma, quake, and Buddha. And for the fighting styles, they only had two: the basic combat fighting style that you get when you join the game, and the dark step fighting style. And there weren't many swords either. There was the Dark Blade, which worked the same way. You had to buy the game pass to get it. Then we had the Saber Sword, Bicento, Cutlass, Triple Katana, Dual Katana, Katana, Warden Sword, Pipe, Dual-Headed Blade, Shark Saw, and Iron Mace. And for the guns, there was literally only 6 of them: the Slingshot, the Musket, the Flintlock, the Refined Slingshot, the Refined Flintlock, and the Cannon. And for the accessories, there were only 5 of them. There was the Vice Admiral's coat, the Tomoe ring, the Swordsman hat, the Pink coat, and Usopp's hat. But they still had the base abilities in the game: the air jump, the hockey, as well as flash touch. You could buy it in the exact same place at the abilities teacher. Moving on to update 2, which came out June 16th, just a couple months after the game released. They increased the level capacity from 300 to 500. They also added 2 new fruits: the Phoenix fruit as well as the Spring fruit. They also added a new island, which was the Magma Village. They also added a new fighting style, which was the electric fighting style, the Soul Cane, the Refined Musket, and they also added the NPC, which removes your Blox fruit, fixed a butt ton of glitches, and reworked the rubber fruit because it was just way different back then. They also increased the mastery capacity in the game, and they even added the passive ability to the light fruit, because back then in the game, the light fruit actually did not have this. Moving on to update number 3, this one came out June 30th. This update, they added 2 new fruits: the String fruit as well as the Rumble fruit. They also added 3 new islands: the Underwater City, the Upper Skylands, as well as the Coliseum. They added the Trident Sword as well as the Pole Sword, the Bazooka, as well as a new NPC called the Lord of Destruction, who was later renamed to the Instinct Teacher. In this update, they also added the Dark Step fighting style, which was initially called Double Devil, which just doesn't make any sense. They also added the ability to upgrade your weapons. In general, they balanced a lot more things. They buffed some fruits and they nerfed some. Moving on to update 3.5, which literally came out 2 days after update 3, they added the Greybeard raid boss, the Bicento V2, and that was pretty much it. Moving on to update number 4, balancing the game with new content. They added the Sand fruit, which is still in the game to this day, as well as a quest to get the Dark Blade V2. They also added the Fruit Notifier game pass, which made it a lot easier to find fruits if you had the Robux to spare. Moving on to update number 5, and this update was focused around the final island of the first sea, the Fountain City. They also increased the max level from 650 all the way to 750, and they added a new fruit called the Gravity fruit. They also added the Water Kung Fu fighting style, which you can find at the Underwater City, as well as the Cool Shades accessory, which you got by defeating the Cyborg boss at the Fountain City. They also nerfed the Dark Blade a bit, which just made things in general a lot more balanced. And they even added the Fast Mode button, so you could change your game's graphics if your PC was struggling. Moving on to update number 6, in this update they just focused on the PvP system, balancing all the fruits. They added Cruise to the game as well as Bounty and Honor. Other than that, they didn't really add anything new, so now Marines actually had a reason to choose the Marines team. Moving on to update 7, they added the Paw Fruit, and other than that, they didn't really add anything. This was just a pretty small update. Moving on to update 8, this was the New World update, and you might be wondering, what is the New World? Well, it's literally just the second sea. They also increased the level capacity to 1000. They added a button of new islands like the Kingdom of Rose, the Green Zone, the Dark Arena, the Graveyard, and the Remote Island. And if you don't know what the Remote Island is, it's literally just this island where you can talk to Usopp and buy a gun. They also added the Barrier Fruit, the Dragon's Breath fighting style. They also added a bunch of swords: the Long Sword, the Gravity Cane, the Sadi, Shisui, and Wado. They added 2 new guns, which was the Sidam Rifle and the Kabucha. And for the accessories, they added the Black Spiky Coat, the Choppa Hat, the Top Hat, the Warrior Helmet, the Dark Coat, as well as the Swan Glasses. And they added a button of NPCs, which let you reset your stat points, change your race, and a bunch of other things. They also added 2 new boats, the Flower Ship as well as the Swan Ship, but unfortunately these boats are no longer in the game. This was also the first time they added the concepts of raids, where they started with the Factory Raid, which isn't technically an actual raid, but they were getting there. They also added the Darkbeard raid boss, which is still one of the strongest bosses to this day. They also added the Game Pass, which let you double your drop chance. Moving on to update 9, this was called the Anti-Copyright update, so the game doesn't resemble One Piece. At the end of the day, it does, but they just did this stuff to avoid copyright. But that's not the only thing they did in this update. They increased the maximum level to 1100, and they also added the Dough Fruit, which is one of the best fruits in the game to this day. They also added the Snow Mountain Island as well as the Superhuman fighting style. And for the swords, they also added the True Triple Katana, which you get by combining the previous 3 swords that they added. Moving on to update 10, this update, they added the Hot and Cold Island, and they increased the max level to 1250. They also added the Control Fruit to the game as well as the Jitte and Coco swords. And they even added a new accessory called the Zebra Cap. They obviously also added the Smoke Admiral. Moving on to update 11, this was the Awakenings update. Well, they didn't really add Awakenings for every fruit, they added it only for the Flame, Ice, and Quake, but this is how they started the concept concept of even awakening fruits. They also finally added fragments to the game, which replaced rare artifacts, because those were just super annoying to use, because if you left the game, so you would literally just lose the rare artifacts you had. Moving on to update 12, this came out on October 21st, 2020. They increased the level capacity to 1,350, and they even added a new race to the game called Ghoul, which is currently one of the best races in the game in my opinion. And they added fruit awakenings for the light fruit as well as the dark fruit. They added a new sword called the Midnight Blade, a new gun called the Bazaar Rifle, and 3 new accessories, the Ghoul Mask, the blue spiky coat, as well as the red spiky coat. And they even added a title system so you could get certain titles by completing certain tasks. Moving on to update 13, this was the Christmas update. They increased the max level to 1,450, and this is when they added the dragon fruit to the game. They also added an awakening for the string fruit, and they added the Ice Castle Island, which really made sense for the Christmas update. They also added a new fighting style called Death Step, which is just the upgraded version of Dark Step. They also added the Rengoku sword by collecting the hidden key after defeating the awakened Ice Admiral at his castle. They also enabled the Christmas event, which basically just lets you talk the Santa Claus, Magic Elf, Blox Fruit Dealer's cousin, and Greedy Elf NPC. He's just been renamed to the Blox Fruit Gotcha. Moving on to update 14, and for this one they increased the max level up to 1,525. They made it so that you could awaken your Rumble Fruit. They added a new island called the Forgotten Island, which was actually the final island added to the second seed. They also added the Cyborg race, which means they finally added every race that we currently have in the game. They also added the Sharkman Karate fighting style, which was actually called Sharkman Kung Fu. They added Zapole V2 as well as the Dragon Trident. They also added YouTuber kill rewards, which made it so that every time you killed a YouTuber, you would get 250,000 belly as well as 2,500 fragment. And you would also get a special title depending on which YouTuber you killed, which is honestly a really cool addition. Moving on to update 15, and it was the third sea update. The max level was increased to 2,000, and they added a butt ton of new fruits. The Venom Fruit, the Spin Fruit, the Door Fruit, the Kilo Fruit, the Diamond Fruit, the Love Fruit, and the Falcon Fruit, all in one update. This was a mega update. They also added fruit awakenings for the Magma Fruit as well as the Butter Fruit. And for the islands, they added the Floating Turtle, the Hydra Island, the Port Town, the Great Tree, and the Castle on the Sea. They finally added the upgraded version of the electric fighting style, which is called Electric Claw. They also added a bunch of new swords, the Yama Sword, the Tushida Sword, the Dark Dagger, Cavender, as well as the Twin Hooks. And they also added a new gun called the Serpent Bow. But that wasn't it, they also added a button of accessories, the Lei accessory, the Pilot Helmet, the Musketeer Hat, the Jaw Shield, the Pretty Helmet, the Valkyrie Helmet, the Bandana, and the Hunter Cape. And obviously, since there's a lot more things to do, they also added a button of new titles to the game, as well as Instinct V2. Moving on to update 16, this was the Halloween update. For this update, they increased the max level to 2,100, and they added the Shadow Fruit as well as the Revive Fruit. They also added the Halloween event where you could talk to an NPC called the Death King, who would give you a random surprise, and the community liked this guy so much that they added him to the game permanently. They also added a new island called the Haunted Castle, as well as the Dragon Talon fighting style, and they even added a new sword to the game called Hallow Scythe. For the accessories, they added the Bear Ears, the Golden Sun Hat, as well as the Holy Crown, and they even added a new boss called the Soul Reaper. Moving on to update 17, bear with me, this update literally has 5 parts. For the part 1 of this update, they added a new fruit called the Soul Fruit, they added a fruit awakening for the Sand Fruit, and they added 2 new islands, Peanut Land and Ice Cream Land, and also a new sword called the Buddy Sword. For the next part, they added fruit awakenings to the Phoenix Fruit, a new island called Cake Land, a new sword called the Spiky Trident, an accessory called the Pale Scarf, and a new raid boss called the Cake Prince. They also finally added sea events to the second and third sea, and this was just the start to it. They added ship raids, the sea beasts, rumbling waters, as well as the Mirage Island, which honestly just paved the way to the sea events that we have now. The next part of this update, they added the Leopard Fruit, and they increased the max level to 2,400. They also finally added a fruit awakening for the Dough Fruit, a new island called Chocolate Land, a new gun called the Soul Guitar, a new sword called the Cursed Dual Katana. They also added a new fighting style called God Human, which is just the most annoying fighting style to get your hands on because you have to have a really high mastery in all the other fighting styles in the game. They also made it so that you could upgrade the Cake Prince into the Dough King so you could finally unlock your Dough raids. They also added Race V4 in this update. The next update was called the Confetti event, which came out on November 30th. And the reason they added this update is because the Gamer Robot YouTube channel actually ended up hitting 1 million subscribers. For this, they added the Party Shop NPC, which you could trade confetti for a butt ton of gifts. Moving on, the next update was the Christmas event, December 26, 2022. For this one, they increased the max level to 2,450. They added a fruit called the Blizzard Fruit. They also added a new island called Candy Cane Land, a new accessory called the Holiday Cloak, and also did a butt ton of rework. The next update came out on January 6th, and for this one, they finalized the Race Awakening. This might not seem like a lot, but back then, it was a massive update. Literally, everyone was talking about Race V4. The next update was the Valentine's event, and for this, they reworked the Love Fruit, making it a lot better to use, making it just a lot cooler, and just more fun to use in general. general. They even added flamingo ride ability, which is honestly really cool. The next up was update 20, where they increased the max level to 2550. And they added 2 new fruits, the mammoth fruit as well as the sound fruit, which are honestly really fun to use. They also added a new island called Tiki Outpost and a new fighting style called Sanguine Art, which is also one of the most difficult fighting styles to obtain. They added a new sword called the Shark Anchor. For the accessories, they added the Leviathan Shield, the Leviathan Crown, the Terror Jaw, as well as the Shark Tooth Necklace. And they even added 2 new boats called the Sloop and the Beast Hunter, and they reworked literally all the other boats in the game. They also reworked every sword. Well, they didn't really change the abilities, they just made the effects a lot cooler and just more pleasant to look at in general. Moving on, the next was update 21, and this was the Ghost event. They remodeled the Revive fruit and changed it into the Ghost fruit. And you guessed it, they did this for copyright. Moving on, the next update was update 22, and this was the Kitsune update, where they finally added the long-awaited Kitsune fruit. And ever since this update came out, the Kitsune fruit has been the undefeated best fruit in the whole of Blox Fruits, at least for PvP. They also added a sword called the Fox Lamp, 2 new accessories called the Kitsune Mask and the Kitsune Ribbon, and they even added new sea events called the Kitsune Shrine and the Blue Moon, which all just help you get Kitsune based items. Moving on, the next update was update 23. They added the T-Rex fruit, and they also added subclasses to the game, but to this day they only have one subclass, which is the shipwright subclass. They also added a new currency called Valor, which just helped you with ship based stuff. And that's how we got to the Blox Fruits we all know and love.